This video is brought to you by the Jazz Gym. Focused coaching sessions for maximum results. Hey guys, so we just finished my first leg of fall touring and it was so awesome seeing a lot of you guys out there on the road. Just wanted to say real quick before we get started here, thanks so much if you came through the shows. It was so great meeting you all. And make sure to check out my website for future tour dates so you can check out more shows when I'm on the road. But anyway, I did a deep dive these past few days researching some studies done on the brain of jazz musicians while improvising. And the results ended up being really interesting, so I just wanted to share with you guys some of the things that I learned. One thing that really stood out to me was the fact that actually one part of your brain shuts down while you're improvising. So there's actually less brain activity in that area. But it ends up actually being a good thing. In fact, the main takeaway of all this research for me was just how good playing music, and specifically how good improvising music, is for your brain development. And now various studies have even debunked the myth that when you get older, it's too late to reap the benefits of playing music. So we all really have no excuse for not getting out our horn and putting it to good use. With all that in mind, I'm gonna give you a few tips later to help you make sure that you're spending quality time with your instrument. But first, let's consider, how does improvising actually affect your brain activity? To examine that more closely, let's check out studies and research done by a neuroscientist and professor, Charles Lim. Charles Lim is a neuroscientist and musician who's done a great deal of research and studies on the cognitive activity of jazz musicians while they're playing, and more specifically, jazz musicians while they're improvising. So in one of Lim's studies, he took 30 jazz pianists and measured their brain activity by using a functional magnetic resonance imaging machine, which is otherwise known as an fMRI. So these jazz pianists literally went into a machine with small keyboards in their hand, and then the machine would illuminate different areas of their brain while they were playing different types of music. So the main observations were made in the prefrontal cortex of the brain. That's the part of the brain located in the frontal lobe, and it's associated with all sorts of cognitive function. It's an area of the brain that's responsible for activity like planning, memorization, decision-making, logic, and memorization skills. Now here's where it gets really interesting. What the research found was two different parts of the prefrontal cortex actually act very differently. One part, called the medial prefrontal cortex, lit up while the musicians were improvising. The medial prefrontal cortex is associated with self-expression, so of course that makes sense. However, another part of the prefrontal cortex, called the dorsolateral prefrontal cortex, actually shut off while the musicians were improvising. So there was much lower brain activity in that area. That actually didn't happen when the musicians were playing memorized music as opposed to improvised music. So this dorsolateral cortex is associated with inhibition, which according to Oxford is a feeling that makes one self-conscious and unable to act in a relaxed and natural way. So essentially when you improvise, your inhibitions are silenced and you're able to rid yourself of the pains of self-monitoring. Now, of course, I'm sure a lot of you don't feel like you get to this euphoric state when you improvise, at least not just yet. I know a lot of people feel like they're not comfortable enough with their level of ability in improvisation to feel like they're able to silence their inhibitions. Which brings up the process of learning how to improvise in jazz, which neurologically actually shows a lot of parallels to learning a new language, a new spoken language, I should specify. You've probably heard a jazz musician say before that learning jazz is just like learning a language. And there's actually neuroscientific research to back up that idea now. So if you're not getting to that euphoric state, it's probably just because you haven't yet spent enough time to be speaking the language of jazz fluently. But there are also some fascinating differences between how your brain activity functions when you're speaking through a language and when you're improvising through the language of jazz on your instrument. So to examine more closely the communication in jazz improvisation, Charles Lim had two pianists trade fours, so they actually played phrases back and forth to each other 4 measures at a time. Through that process, he was able to find that the area of the brain associated with syntax, which is called the anterior temporal lobe, became very active. But wait, there's more to it. Lim also found that the area of the brain associated with semantics, which is called the inferior frontal gyrus, actually shut down. So in other words, the part of the brain associated with syntax which according to Oxford is the arrangement of words and phrases to create well-formed sentences in a language, became very active while the pianists were trading phrases back and forth. But the part of the brain associated with semantics, which deciphers the meaning of language, actually deactivated and became less active. Now, these findings are totally open to interpretation, and Lim himself actually said that he was surprised by this finding. But what's interesting is that we found earlier that a decrease in activity in the dorsolateral cortex while improvising means a release in inhibitions, which is arguably a good thing. I'm no neuroscientist, but I would imagine that maybe that could contribute to the Zen-like euphoric state that we get to while improvising. So is it possible that lower activity in regard to semantics could be a good thing as well? Because the syntax part of the brain shows such high activity, clearly there is stimulation surrounding the construction of the music being improvised. But if we're letting go of the meaning of what we're playing on a cerebral level, is it possible that we're freeing our mind and this is actually helping us get to that euphoric state? Perhaps there could be something else that's happening on a deeper level. So just like the decrease of activity in the dorsolateral cortex results in our releasing our inhibitions, perhaps the decrease in activity in the inferior frontal gyrus helps us let go of the meaning of it all and maybe helps us get to a more Zen-like state. The research on music and its effects on the brain is always developing, but some recent studies may provide clarity to something that's been speculated for a long time, and that is whether music actually makes you smarter and even makes your brain bigger. So back in 1995, research at a university in Germany found that when comparing 30 musicians to 30 non-musicians, the corpus callosum region of the brain in musicians was significantly larger. Now, the corpus callosum is the part of the brain that ensures both sides of the brain can communicate with each other. So needless to say, it is crucial for effective brain function. But it's very important when analyzing the data to understand the difference between correlation and causation. Correlation is defined as a mutual relationship or connection between two or more things, but that does not mean that one caused the other. For instance, there is a correlation between the amount of ice cream sales and the amount of murders committed in the United States, but there has been no causation found between the two. So in other words, there is no proof that more ice cream consumption leads to more murders. As of today, the connection seems to remain purely coincidental. So in order to prove causation, we need to find not only a connection between the two, but also empirical evidence that one causes the other. So although a study like that makes it seem pretty clear that playing music helps cause higher brain function, we do need proof that musicians just don't happen to be smarter people. And conversely, that the actual act of playing music increases your brain function and therefore makes you smarter. This research published by the National Institute for Biotechnology may provide that proof. This study was able to demonstrate structural brain changes in children who received 15 months of musical training compared to children who did not. So this article goes into incredibly great detail about how they did the studies to ensure its relevance and accuracy. But here's the main takeaway. The study says, with regard to between group brain differences, we did not see any differences between groups at time 1. So time 1 was when the study started. So they're saying in the beginning, there was no difference between the subjects that were about to play music for 15 months and the subjects that were not. So then it goes on to say, in terms of between group differences between the two time points, instrumental children showed significantly different brain deformation changes over the 15 months. So that's time 2 scan at 15 months minus time 1 scan at 0 months, compared with controls. Okay, so first we should just clarify that deformation in this case just means the changing of shape. The word deformation is sometimes thought to have a negative connotation, but in this case, it literally just means that it's changing form and it's actually growing. So what this sentence is essentially saying is the brains of the children playing instrumental music for 15 months changed and grew more than the brains of the children that did not play music for 15 months. Then it goes on to say that instrumental children showed areas of greater relative voxel size than those of controls in motor areas, such as the right precentral gyrus and the corpus callosum, that were significant at a whole brain cluster threshold, as well as in a right primary auditory region. And then there's a whole bunch of scientific jargon in there that has to do with hypotheses that I'm not going to go into. But then it goes on to say, some significant brain deformation differences were also found outside auditory and motor brain areas. Instrumental children showed areas of greater relative voxel size than those of controls in bilateral frontolateral and frontomesial regions and a left posterior percingulate region. Okay, wow, you guys get the point. Blah, blah, blah. Pretty much all it's saying is this. The study used a controlled scientific method to limit the variables between the different subjects. And the research ended up showing that the brains of the children who practiced instrumental music for 15 months actually had significantly more brain development, and the size of their brain actually became larger than those who did not practice instrumental music. And it's important to note that although both have benefits, there are a myriad of studies showing that playing music is significantly more productive than just listening to music. And not only that, but contrary to popular belief, it's never too late to reap the benefits. Jennifer Bugos, an assistant professor of music education at the University of South Florida, Tampa, studied the impact of individual piano instruction on adults between the ages of 60 and 85. So according to this research and the article published, after 6 months, those who had received piano lessons showed more robust gains in memory, verbal fluency, the speed at which they processed information, planning ability, and other cognitive functions compared with those who had not received lessons. So if playing music and not just listening to it is so good for you, why do we have so much trouble getting ourselves to do it? A bunch of my former students who practiced consistently have already gone on to become exceptional and successful musicians, and 2 of which are actually now trainers at this new jazz gym program that we've just launched. But the vast majority of developing musicians that I talk to say that they rarely make enough time for their practicing. And they also regret that they don't improve at a faster rate. So this is actually what inspired me to start this new program called the Jazz Gym. So the Jazz Gym is a full-range group practice session that combines approaches for vocabulary development, technique, line construction, chord progression fluency, sound development, and ear training. All skill levels are welcome, and our workout sessions cater exercises for musicians ranging from beginning improvisers looking to learn fundamentals to professionals looking to take their chops to the next level. So I wanted to come up with a way to help keep people accountable, to help coach them through their practice sessions, and to help give them guidance through the material that they're working on throughout each practice session. Essentially, the Jazz Gym does a lot of the hard stuff for you. It helps you book a session where you set aside time for your practicing. It gives you access to a workout plan that I've designed for the daily sessions. And it gives you access to trainers who will help give you guidance through each session. So all you really have to do is show up and follow the instructions of the coaching session. Each training session has 3 different blocks that cover a different topic, and each block has 3 different exercises within that concept, and you can pick from one of the exercises depending on your skill level. That way you can pick your own workout challenge that you're comfortable with. So without getting into a whole other deep dive on productivity, there's a lot of research that shows scheduling, setting goals for yourself, and having a plan for what you're working on is the most effective way to improve at whatever you're pursuing. So if you want to take advantage of this program as a resource for you, make sure to click the link below. For a limited time, we're actually making it so you can book a free class. So you can literally just try this for free, give it a try, see what you think, see how it works for you. And I look forward to seeing you over there. Regardless, thanks so much for watching this video. I had a blast making it. We learned so much through this process, and I hope you guys learned something too. Make sure to subscribe if you haven't already and leave a comment for us in the comment section below. And also make sure to check out my website for upcoming tour dates. Would love to see you guys out there in person real soon. Thanks again for watching, and I'll see you next time.
Yes.
This would be good blooper footage. Gyrus. Wow, that sounds inappropriate. Corpus callosum. Okay, got it. Deformation. Okay, cool. Voxel. Yeah.
Doesn't even have a pronunciation.
Oh god. Voxel. Okay, great. Bugos.
Bugos.
Oh wow. Glad we checked that one.